From palm tops to tablets, netbooks to smartphones, the battle to find the perfect balance of power and portability in a computing device has rumbled on for decades. And in today's Tech Nibble, we look at one such example from the 1990s, which refused to compromise. It's part of the Toshiba Libretto family, a range which in 1996 offered the world's smallest commercially available full Windows PC experience in a package the size of a paperback book and weighing under 850 grams. Join me in the cave today as we take a look at the Toshiba Libretto 70 CT.
This episode is supported by MonsterJoysticks.com. Level up your Raspberry Pi with our all-in-one arcade kit using genuine Sanwa arcade parts. And OneClickPrint.com for your photos on canvas, acrylic, gifts and more. Local craftsmen and global delivery.
Hello cave dwellers, yes, this little beastie really does pack a punch. This model comes from 1997, but it continues the trend set by Toshiba with their Libretto range, which started with the Libretto 20 in 1996. The ethos behind the range was not to compromise like the Palm Pilot over here or this compact handheld. These devices used hardware which would try to find a balance between power, performance and battery life. That was the most important thing for them, and it would use things like the Windows CE or the Palmos operating system to try and find that balance. This instead tried to squeeze everything that you would get in a laptop PC into a much smaller package, and I just don't see how doing that can't result in a compromise. There has to be something wrong with it. So I'm looking forward to firing it up and exploring it with you to see just how well it performs. But you were paying a lot of money for this. In 1997, this model would have cost you around $2,000 US, and it's part of a series that started in 1996, in Japan only, with the Toshiba Libretto 20. Now that machine was running a 486DX4 75 MHz processor, again, pretty beefy for the time, and that evolved in Japan only from the 20 through to the 60 series. That took the specs from a 486 to a Pentium running at 100 MHz, and it obviously performed well enough for Toshiba in Japan for them to consider making this a worldwide product. And that's where the 70 CT that we have here comes into line. And it packs a pretty decent punch. There's a Pentium 120 MHz processor in there. As standard, it has a 1.6 GB hard drive and 16 MB of RAM. So it'll be interesting to see if this has been upgraded in its lifetime, because it's had a well-used life thanks to the person who donated it to the cave. That's Neil Harris. So thank you, Neil, for this donation. He hasn't wiped the hard drive, and we won't be going into any personal documents, but it will give us an idea, I think, of what this was used for when we see what programs were installed, what documents were made on it. And get an idea, is this keyboard, this tiny keyboard, is it even usable? Because it already feels pretty difficult on my fat fingers, but we'll find out. So let's start by having a little look around the device and we'll see what ports and options we've got on there, as well as some optional extras. Let's take a look.
A cursory look around the device then might suggest we're lacking ports, and you'd be absolutely right. On the rear here, we only have an audio output and an infrared device, and on one side a PCMCIA slot, which itself opens up plenty of upgrade options, but with the optional I/O adapter here, which is like a little docking station, we can add serial, parallel and a video output. Very handy indeed, although it does add some size and weight to our ultra portable device. And of course there's no room for a floppy drive in here. There just isn't the space for the size of a floppy disk, although in Europe and the US one was included which attached via that PCMCIA port, but in Japan it was an optional extra which you had to pay for. Pretty essential for this era of computing, as might also be a CD-ROM drive, again with a PCMCIA interface. Your laptop bag was soon starting to fill up. On a full charge, you should get about 2 hours from the lithium-ion battery here, or 4 hours if you opted for the long life battery, which again would add additional bulk to the unit. But the real fun comes when we open it up to reveal a 6.1-inch display. This is an active matrix screen which is lit from the side, and we've got the tiniest keyboard in front of it as we saw earlier. My first impressions of that screen in the dimly lit cave here is actually not bad. I can cope with this perfectly well, but I'm under no illusion that as soon as we take this outside, it may become completely unusable, and we will put that to the test. To the right of the screen is a little joystick, and that is in fact the mouse, which is used in conjunction, if we spin it round, with the left and right mouse buttons on the back of the screen. If I flip the felty cover off and try not to lose it, you can see that it's just a little joystick similar to that found on Toshiba's full-size laptops and things like the IBM ThinkPad's Nibble in the middle of the keyboard, and it works just as well as those. So now that we have a VGA output using that little docking station there, let's hook this up to the capture device and see what we can do with it. A quick memory test at boot shows that we have 16 megabytes of RAM installed, and the hard drive starts to chunter away as Windows 98 boots. This would have shipped with Windows 95, so it's been upgraded at some point, and we get that familiar startup sound. I haven't heard that for quite some time. A Sound Blaster Pro compatible sound card takes care of those sound duties. Poking around in the start menu, I found the usual Microsoft Office applications, and good old Winamp is tucked away in there, and we can also see things like the AA guide to pubs and inns in Britain has been installed, as well as an Attica interactive atlas and a route planner. This is the Focus Travel Series route planner, and it's nice to see this on here because it suggests that the thing really did have a life on the road and it was used for its intended purpose. This didn't sit on a desk for its life, and it's a reminder that route planning software was a thing. It's all part of cloud-based services now and things like Google Maps. And while the display on here isn't the brightest and there's no brightness controls, I am impressed with the speed at which it refreshes. There's no ghosting, there's no tails on the mouse cursor. It feels like a pretty high quality screen from the era, so no real compromises have been made in this department. Taking a look in the My Documents folder, we can see that the owner had no fear of typing out Word documents with this keyboard. Over 400 Word documents in fact, which I won't pry too much into because they may contain personal information, but it certainly goes to show that it was a very well used machine, just as much as any desktop PC of the period. And aside from a little disk thrashing as Windows 98 dips in and out of the swap file to operate with 16 megabytes of RAM, it really is quite pleasurable to use, or at least as far as Windows 98 experiences go. If we swap the hard drive out for a compact flash drive and maybe took this up to 32 megabytes, I think it would be a really good portable little retro machine. And back then, just as now, it should be more than just a novelty or a toy with the retail price that it had. It was a serious chunk of change. Although the price did quickly fall to half the original $2,000 as subsequent models superseded our 70CT. All the way through to the Libretto FF1100, which had a Pentium 266 and a built-in digital camera. After an extended period of use, I found that whether I'm knocking up a poster in Publisher and then sending it off to my HP LaserJet 4L via the IR port, or dropping back to DOS to have a quick game of Quake, it does it with relative ease, and I can see just why so many documents have been created on the thing. It would have been a joy to use on the train in the 90s, or to have perhaps popped it out of your pocket, plugged it into a projector in a meeting while travelling light, and annoyed the local IT department when all of the execs in that meeting asked you what it was and demanded that their own IT department buy it for them. I'm sure many of you know that struggle. The only gripe really is perhaps the lack of a built-in network adapter. Yes, you could add one on the PCMCIA port, and what would really elevate this device would be a USB port, but it's understandable that it's not here. It had only just been developed when it was released, and it would be a year later in 1998 when we'd first see it as a standard in a computer with the Apple iMac's release. So entirely understandable why that's not here. USB would appear in the Libretto L1 model in 2001, as well as a FireWire port.
So after a weekend of extended testing, including a typing test, which we'll get to in a minute, I can give you my thoughts on this. And I think the key thing about this device is Don't think about it as a PDA. If you consider it the same as a Palm Pilot or this compact device over here, which turn on quickly, which have really nice long battery lives, you're going to get really annoyed. This does have an extra utility for hibernation, which was severely lacking in Windows 98, and it does a good job. But even with its own hibernation utility, the time it takes to boot up, the time it takes to open Outlook, if you want to use this as a PDA type device, you're going to get annoyed very quickly. However, if we set our expectations as a small laptop and not as a PDA, well then everything falls into line. This is actually a really superb little device, albeit an expensive one. There are two key things to consider though. Of course, the keyboard. As a typing test, I typed a page of A4 on this and also on my main desktop PC with a full-sized keyboard. And yes, the error rate was vastly increased with this tiny keyboard. You really do have to slow down and take your time. So that is a bit of a bugbear with me. And then of course there's the screen. It's fine here in the cave. I can use it perfectly well, even on quick moving programs like Quake. But if I take it outside and we get sunlight on that screen, yeah, it's not ideal, is it? But I can't really hold it too much to fault, because even if I took out a full-size laptop of the period, you're going to get the same result. This is a decent screen for the time. And time is a key word. These really are devices of their time. You just don't get the form factor like this anymore, short of the occasional smartphone in a clamshell design with a keyboard, and they're few and far between. This was a period when the design philosophy was just make it smaller. Take a laptop and just shrink it down. And it never quite worked. No matter which way you tried it, didn't quite work. You could get away with annoyances like the small keyboard, and yes, you could make it usable. But it wasn't really until Apple came along. It's true, some may disagree with me, but when Apple came along with their iPhone and showed us how to do it properly, when they came along and showed us how to do tablet computing properly with a UI, with a touchscreen keyboard, and not just Apple, but when all of those other technologies came together, like the screen display technology, nice bright screen display technology that allowed us to have a really usable touch interface. They all came together and they rendered these kind of devices redundant. Now, the Libretto name didn't die with this series. It was revived by Toshiba as recently as 2010. This particular model is the Libretto W100, which was kind of like a folding tablet with two screens, a bit like a big Nintendo DSi. It was an interesting design, really. You could see they were trying something different. And it did carry the same ethos as our old Libretto, in that it wanted to squeeze a full desktop experience, Windows 7 in this case, into a portable device. And you can see from this promo video that even by 2010 standards, the compromise is visually evident with something that looks like a chunky tablet. Even more so when you consider the first iPad was also released in this year. And as an object, I imagine its former owner, Mr. Harris, would have become quite attached to this. He's obviously been on a few journeys with it. He's made a lot of Word documents on it, and I imagine quite a few nice memories are wrapped up and attached to it, which is why I will be taking good care of it here in the cave. And it is a nice addition and a nice snapshot of history to add to our collection here in the cave. The Toshiba Libretto 70CT then was a full-fat PC in an MC Hammer-sized pocket form factor, and I've dealt with much worse attempts at portability. A worthy addition indeed to the cave, and another stepping stone in what felt like a very long and sometimes arduous path to the practical, portable and usable mobile devices that we enjoy today. As always, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and take care.
If you enjoy my content and would like to support The Cave while receiving a completely ad-free experience and access to releases 1 week before they go public, then visit patreon.com/retromancave and join the official Cave Dwellers. Thank you for your support.